Peace and welcome to the culture right here on the Black Star Network. Folks, we got a great show for you. First, let's talk about what happened last night. Big primaries in big states. Man, we were going to break down some of the results and just giving us some insight into what were some of the top priorities for constituents around the country. We'll have that. Also, let's talk a little bit about the upcoming January 6th hearing that is scheduled to be televised prime time tomorrow. We're going to talk a little bit about that, getting you ready. And then at the 4 o'clock hour, folks, I got to have a conversation with another mayor, Mayor Robin Mouton of Beaumont, Texas, talks about what is happening in her respective city and the work that she's doing. And then later, it's going to be me and you, folks. Can we talk about Deshaun Watson? I mean, for real. Can we please talk about Deshaun Watson? I'm going to break down to you the latest report coming from the New York Times investigation of how serious the violations of the quarterback really is. So we'll have that conversation. So stay with us. That's all happening on today's edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Let's go. Folks, welcome to the show, and so glad that you're able to join us today here on The Culture on the Black Star Network. And of course, folks, we're having a lot of great big conversations, and as while we're having those discussions, we want to make sure that you are engaged and involved. So make sure y'all check into our Culture Crew online community that's happening right now. It's chatting it up. Big shout out to everybody in the Culture Crew online community on Facebook, on YouTube, and all of the other platforms, because we want to make sure that your voice is heard loud and clear. So many of you have been bringing some very, very powerful insights and you providing your analysis of these discussions that the show would not be the same if I don't hear from you. So make sure y'all join. Be ready to post your comments as we have these discussions. All right, folks, let me just say this. Today, we wanted to kick off the discussions around the primaries. Now, if you lived in some of the big states that these primaries were held in, you know that this was a serious midterm election cycle for a lot of states around the country. The big countries, the big primaries, the results are in, but you're looking at the big state of California. So much is happening in California right now, from the state level to the big race out there with the mayoral race in Los Angeles between Representative Congresswoman Karen Bass, and billionaire Rick Caruso. So we will see how that pans out, because they're going into a runoff election in November. So that's a lot happening there. The states of Iowa, Mississippi, Montana, New Mexico, New Jersey, and South Dakota all had their primaries yesterday. And there were some big takeaways from all of these contests that we need to discuss. And so today we wanted to have that conversation, and I wanted to have it with someone who I know has been keeping his eye on the political landscape, both locally and nationally. He serves as the director of public policy for the think tank Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle, and we are happy to have him join us here on The Culture on the Black Star Network, my brother Davon Love. Davon, good to talk to you, brother. How are you this afternoon?
I'm good, bro. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. All right. So when we talk about everybody's pumping this up, that this is a pivotal primary election season, or a pivotal election season. As a director of public policy, how do you look at this election cycle versus, say, the national election cycle that we see every 4 years?
So I think one of the important things to look at when looking at these primaries is looking at the major trends, right? And so we've seen over the past several years a more robust, left wing of the Democratic Party burgeon. And we're starting to see the rift between the kind of centrists and progressives that emerge as kind of a central theme. And talking, particularly when you talk about the Democratic Party, we're beginning to see that. And one of the places where this convergence is most relevant is on the issue of public safety and criminal justice, because this is a place, this is a key distinction as a matter of policy, between those that are more centrist and those that are more progressive. And one of the things I think we're seeing in the primaries over, yesterday, and that we'll continue to see, is in some regards a repudiation of the policy perspective of progressives and leftists on some of these questions of public safety. Now, I don't think that signals that the policy perspectives when we talk about alternatives to law enforcement. We talk about not using sentence enhancements and mandatory minimums. I think those are the correct policies, but what I think what we're starting to see is that I think progressives in many contexts have been ineffective at communicating how these progressive measures actually deal effectively with the issue of public safety. And so that has given the centrist and right wing an opportunity to style themselves as caring more about the communities that often are the constituents of places governed by Democrats. They're often able to style themselves as caring more about what's happening in the community because they're speaking more directly to the concerns of violence and homicide and public safety in ways that I think progressives have been ineffective, even though I believe they have, for the most part, the more effective and favorable policy perspective on those issues.
Mm, mm. So, I mean, there was a huge expectation, Davon, and I'm sure you've seen it just as much as I've seen. There's this huge expectation that coming out of the protest of the killing of George Floyd and that what we saw with protests across the country around police reform, police brutality, especially during the summer of 2020, that going into this election cycle, that there was going to be some explosion of progressive policies, that there was going to be an explosion of new faces, new candidates, and more importantly, that people were going to be more accepting of certain things. But we're not seeing that. We're not seeing
Yeah.
that. We're still seeing a lot of slow progress, gradual change, a lot of talk about, we have to take this thing step by step instead of this very drastic measure. What do you attribute that to?
So even when we look back at the referendum in Minneapolis on the question of the abolition of their police department, the establishment of a new agency that would deal with public safety, that amendment failed, which I think kind of forecasted what we're seeing in the primaries, as we just discussed, where the more centrist candidates are getting more headway and progressives are starting to feel the blows. And so let me just get more specific about, what I think that's about. Part of the challenge is that when we look at the conditions that produce violence, I think everyone agrees that the socioeconomic conditions that produce violence, poverty, homelessness, all the kind of oppressive systems that organize this white supremacist society are the major contributors to violence. The problem is that we have to be able to deliver answers to deal in the short and intermediate term as to how to deal with these questions of public safety of violence as we work on the larger kind of systemic issues. And this is a place, again, where progressives have not done a good job. They haven't done a good job of helping to present alternatives to how to deal with public safety. In Baltimore, for instance, we have the We Are Us movement, right? It's a group of clergy,
Right.
former street organizations, like folks who are going out every day, engaging the community. And they have an approach to dealing with, community violence and the like that the community can actually see, right? And unfortunately, the conversations that I've seen, particularly in mainstream channels, on some of the more progressive approaches to public safety and violence often don't spotlight folks other from the community who are dealing with issues of violence and homicide every day. And so if you're a regular voter, you're a grandmother who, there are people on your corner and they're getting in your way of being able to go to the grocery store, go to the bus stop. If you're not hearing something that speaks directly to how your particular circumstance is going to be addressed, then the progressive alternatives don't seem as appealing. And so I think I think that's really the challenge, is that and again, I'm a person who in our state's capital and locally in Baltimore City and the state of Maryland have fought against mandatory minimums, has fought to, help to give resources for alternatives to law enforcement. But I know with my organization, we also focus in talking about anti-violence measures, because what I believe it does is that it helps kind of the average person feel like we're trying to address, or see that we're trying to address, the immediate issues of public safety while also engaging in the criminal justice reform that is necessary. And again, I just don't think that the progressive wing of the Democratic Party and its advocates have done a good job of that. And I think the primaries are evidence that they just haven't done a good job of making their case.
Yeah, and I think, bro, I think that that's probably one of the big challenges facing progressive politics, right? Like progressive politics a lot of time focuses on the big picture because it's like, oh, the problem isn't just happened yesterday, it's been happening for 50 years, right? And so, the buy-in of getting people to side with progressive politics becomes very challenging simply because of the time that it would take to address the problem versus when you're dealing with, like you said, that grandmother. I mean, yeah, we could talk about quote unquote defunding the police. We could talk about all of those other new ideas, but the reality is if grandma gets robbed by somebody in the neighborhood, we expect the police to be there and to capture the robber. We don't, you know what I mean? Like the
Right,
progressive ideas don't match the reality.
right.
And all, you are a person that studied revolutions, you studied history and especially Black history. When we looked at those past movements, Black Power movement, Civil Rights movement, how were they able to get people to think big while still working on the here and now?
Right. So I would say two things. The first is that um, if you talk to people in the neighborhood who are narrowly focused on their community and the issues of violence and safety in their community, one of the things that has happened is, from a political perspective, many folks have only been given two options: more police or less police.
Right.
Now, if you go to folks and say, hey, what if we get a group of sisters, brothers, family to come together and help to proactively deal with conflicts and to help patrol the community and help to keep the community safe, folks in the community would accept that. But that's not often an option that is provided to them, right? And so one part of it is, being engaged directly in the grassroots and helping to shape people's consciousness beyond the options that people are put
Mm,
that people are given, right? Because
mm,
I've seen it where that same grandmother, if you say, well, let's not do police, but what about these brothers that live in the community and making sure they can watch? They're more excited about that than law
mm.
enforcement, right? And really, law enforcement for a lot of people is the last resort. The second piece on this too, particularly we talking about public safety and violence. I think one of the biggest mistakes that is made in terms of the messaging about police accountability, police reform, is that if we're talking about public safety, one of the biggest challenges is the corruption and incompetence of law enforcement, and it's really hard to overstate. Some of your viewers probably watch, We Own the City, and I know that's getting a lot of attention. And one of the things I want
Yeah.
to tell your viewers, it's worse than that, right? The level of incompetence and corruption within law enforcement. And so with that being said, while as people like myself advocates for police accountability to address police brutality, the issue of corruption and incompetence in law enforcement has a deleterious effect on public safety, because you can't effectively get the community to testify against someone who people know who committed violence in our community if law enforcement has this level of incompetence and level of corruption. And so I think it's important. So to your question, it's connecting all these dots in a
Yep.
way that is grounded in people's immediate needs, right? And so as a person who, my larger philosophical perspective is the abolition of police and prisons. I think that's the ultimate goal we want to go. And that's a place that's going to take many, centuries to get to.
Mm.
I understand that in the here and now, in addressing the immediate issues facing our community, that the very narrow, limited job of law enforcement is to get the people who are driving violence and homicide in our community off the street. That's the very narrow, limited job that if they're going to exist, that they should do.
Yep.
And if they are corrupt and not transparent and incompetent, then they can't accomplish that goal, right? And so I think grounding again these things in people's everyday material needs is how we get people to see the larger picture of Black
Yeah.
liberation and abolition.
Folks, I want y'all to start posting your comments and letting us know what your thoughts are as we're talking to Mr. Davon Love, Brother Davon Love, Director of Public Policy for the think tank Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. Post your comments. We'll get to as many as we can and share your thoughts on this. One of the other things, of course, too, Davon, is when we look at what's happening in across the country outside of public safety is this issue around guns, right? You know, of course, everybody has been talking about these mass shootings. Just over this past weekend, there were 10 mass shootings and again, mass shootings being defined, folks, by 4 or more victims of gun violence, right? So there were 10 mass shootings in a 2-day period, in a weekend period in this country. There's been a lot of talk about access to guns. There's certainly been some talk about mental health of gun owners. What's your stance and what's your take, bro, on this conversation? Because in light of those larger displays of violence, we know in the Black community, gun control, gun ownership. I mean, we don't even have those conversations, even though we are plagued with gun violence each and every day. In some Black neighborhood in this country, gun violence is running rampant. So how do we link? And my thinking is, do we need to label the atrocity of gun violence that we see in our own community as a mass shooting in order to get the type of attention and resources? Where do we go with that?
So a couple things. The first, to the point you made about gun control, and this is going to be largely unpopular, particularly, with the kind of the mainstream here. I think questions of gun control are going to be the least effective at addressing this issue. Gun control is a good kind of political prop for Democrats to appear as if they're doing something on the issue, because the other stuff to really address it is a lot harder. So it's easier to try to push some legislation to do gun control that, in my estimation, will have a very minor modicum of success and won't make a big dent in the actual problem of gun violence. So that's one thing. To your question of linking it to, in terms of like mass shootings and what's been happening, I listen to everything. I listen to the opposition. I listen to, all different perspectives. And I was listening to this conversation on Fox News where one of the anchors actually was describing one of the mass shooters as, and I'm paraphrasing, but as a person so alienated from larger society, so belittled, so denigrated, that they described as kind of the underlying motivation as to why they would do this, and the importance of the breakdown of society, as they put it, right? And that part is his own conversation. But the relevant point here is, and again, quoting Amos Wilson in Black on Black Violence, paraphrasing again, describing the phenomena of violence in our communities as the externalization of a suicidal impulse, that when, as Black people, images and representations, narratives of our worthlessness, right, particularly of young Black people, makes it easy to take the life of someone that looks like us. And so if we want to deal really with how guns are used, we have to deal with the fact that we're in a society that undermines and assaults the humanity of people of African descent in all manner of societal propaganda. And that we have to do the work of lifting up the people that are addressing the violence in our communities. So again, no gun control legislation is going to solve that. That people are still going to have access to weapons, whether legal or illegal. It's a question of, can we shift the culture within our own communities and have the appropriate investment in our communities so that we have the infrastructure we need to address the culture of our communities that lead people to use guns and to do violence against one another.
Absolutely. Let's go to a couple of comments before we take our first pause here, folks. And again, keep the comments coming because we want to get to them as much as we can. Janelle, always good to hear from you, Janelle. Police reform should never mean do nothing. San Francisco's DA had a reputation of not hitting the ground running.
Yeah. If I can say something quickly on that, just real quick, I think that's also one of the challenges, I think, with the move towards progressive prosecutors, progressive folks on some of these issues, is that while some people have the right policy perspective in terms of actually operationalizing that policy can be a challenge. And then what the media will do is use those bad examples of operationalizing it as an argument against some of these progressive measures.
Absolutely. Let's go to Mike V. Mike checked in. Mike, good to hear from you too, brother. Mike said progressive candidates have to come up with reform that produces tangible outcomes in the same way they did for decriminalization of marijuana and the legalization of cannabis via social equity programs. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, I would agree with you on that, Mike. And you know, I think Davon, it takes, you know, you I feel like sometimes like the way people think or our relationship and understanding of the political space is like the Titanic. It will take time to turn from the iceberg, right? You know what I mean? Like to get us to think differently. Because as much as black folks like to say we're progressive, we're not. We're not as progressive as I don't think we often tout ourselves to be. I think we're very conservative in some ways, and we might be moderately liberal, but I don't think we're full blown progressive just yet. And that might just be because one, you know, we've worked so hard to assimilate into the system. Now you're telling us to get back out of it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then
I
for
mean,
others, and then for others, it's like, well, I could be progressive, but is that going to interrupt what I'm trying to establish for myself?
right, right. I think a couple of things. One is the disparity in access to capital in our community. I think has created a situation where, you know, black people, particularly those in public positions, elected offices, are relying on the corporate sector that have an interest in conservative policies. So I think that's one aspect of it is that because as a person who does legislative advocacy, I end up having some of those backroom conversations where a black legislator will say, I want to, but leadership, you know, they're going to run someone against me. Like these are some of the things. So I think that's one piece. And then again, as I said earlier, I think the other piece that's important is, again, to Mike's point, you know, we have to talk to and with our community about how these solutions actually impact the community. I think too often, and again, you know, progressives who, again, on policy, you know, mostly agree, but sometimes there's a tendency to kind of on high, kind of try to, you know, dictate to our community what our position should be and not do the work of actually like going into the community and again explaining to that grandmother, like, look, I know you're saying you want more police, but that's not quite what you want, right? Here's something else that's better that accomplishes the goal. And I think that's the work that doesn't get done nearly enough. That I think, because I actually think black people are more radical. It's just that black people, our rigor for what's a workable solution is much higher, and we need to actually
Okay.
deliver on these things.
Oh man, folks! Look, we got to take a quick pause. When we come back, more conversation with our special guest, brother Davon Love, who serves as the director of public policy for the think tank Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. We'll talk to him about the primaries, and let's talk about what we can expect for tomorrow's big televised hearing for the January 6th committee. We'll have that conversation in the next 30. So stay with us. A lot to get to right here on The Culture, here on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back, folks.
Welcome you to the launch of the Mass Poor People's Low Wage Assembly and Moral March on Washington, D.C., June 18, 2022.
We are a new, unsettling force, and we are powerful. New, unsettling force, and we are here.
We're rising up to demonstrate the compelling power that we, poor and low-income people, have to reconstruct society from the bottom up.
And we need to do it with the loudest voices possible, the biggest actions possible.
Because we know that there is no scarcity in this land. The only scarcity is the moral will to do what's right.
Hold on, just a little while longer.
We are those with sub-minimum wage jobs who can't afford sky-high rent.
People with disabilities are the fastest growing minority group.
It's crazy to me that in 2021, it's still legal for workplaces to pay a sub-minimum wage to people with disabilities.
There are still so much trial and tribulations that we go through as indigenous people. We can't get a decent wage to sustain ourselves, nor can we get adequate housing.
Veterans across this nation say enough is enough. We can't pat essential workers on the back on one day and then cut their health care the next day.
Health is a political choice.
What more do I need to do to prove that my voice is just as valuable as anyone else's?
There are still forces in denial that would try to slow walk our transition to a clean economy and a just future for us all.
We have an immoral system run by immoral people.
But together we walk and we fight.
It's time for a change. Reconstruyamos esta gran nación.
See, we are people of resilience. As we fight these interlocking injustices together,
When we work together, mobilize together, and rise together, we become a voice for the voiceless, and we become an agent of change in a time where great change is needed. We need the third reconstruction to ensure that deaf people, people with disabilities, and all people can have the right to live and to thrive.
We know what they are doing, but the question is, what are we going to do? Reconstruction begins when we change our mentality and say it's time for you to get your foot off of my neck.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, we've been having a fantastic discussion talking about last night's primary, some of the big issues that were on the ballot. 7 states, a number of states, 7 states had their primaries tonight, one of the big cycles for this election season. And it continues to be that in some of these states, like the state of California and others, they are going to lead to a runoff that in the city in the month of November. Now, as a result of that, voters are giving a lot of different choices of how they want their leadership to represent them in Washington, especially among this very, very politically partisan space that we find this country in. Now, we've been having this discussion with the Director of Public Policy for the think tank Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle to give us his insight, Brother Davon Love. And I just want to throw that in the mix, folks, when we are not just looking at the primaries, let's talk about what's going to be happening over the next day as this country starts to really see the work of the January 6th committee. This is the committee that was formed, the House Select Committee that was formed 1 year ago to investigate what happened on that fateful day of January 6, 2021, the attack on the Capitol, and lawmakers are set to make their case public. Now, the January 6th committee is chaired by Benny G. Thompson, who serves as the chair, the congressman out of Mississippi, the Democratic congressman, and Vice Chairwoman Liz Cheney, who is the Republican out of Wyoming. They're going to have this series of televised hearings. The first one will be tomorrow. The second one will be on Monday. It's going to feature a combination of live witnesses, pre-taped interviews with figures that include the Trump family members and previously unseen video footage of what we saw on the attack of the Capitol. Previously unseen video footage, folks. So you can just bet at your bottom dollar that this is going to be something else. And again, this will be televised starting at 8 o'clock tomorrow night. I want to bring Brother Davon Love back into the conversation for this part as well. We're talking primaries, we're talking the January 6th committee. But Davon, from your vantage point, looking at the work of what happened, looking at the work of the committee, and then having, they did this year's work. I read that they had, at the time, it was like a few months ago, they had spoken to over 550 people, and witnesses, and getting testimony from a number of folks, both from the Republican side and the Democratic side. And now we're at this point where this is going to be a live hearing, a publicized hearing, a televised hearing. What do you think is going to possibly happen, and how will this impact the primary elections that this country is already in?
So I'm gonna preface my response by, one of the things John Henry Clark once said is that, sometimes certain stories that, they're all good guys, sometimes they're no good guys, sometimes they're all bad guys. And one of the things I want to say is that in this context, we have all bad guys. And what I mean by that is that both the Democratic and Republican Party have both participated in the denigration of Black people in their different ways, but ways that are harmful nonetheless. And I preface with that because I think the January 6th Commission has the function that it has served politically is to shield the Democratic Party in many ways from legitimate criticisms of the way that it has participated in the denigration of Black folks. And so it serves, I think, as a convenient distraction from those kind of criticisms. With that being said, I think what's important for Black people to look for as these hearings are taking place, it's important for us to be clear that the rise of Donald Trump is an extension, a continuation of what many of us already knew to be the kind of a particular iteration of white nationalism, and that has become dominant within the Republican Party. And so what we need to be looking for are the folks for whom are the institutional anchors of the white nationalist formations. And many of these formations don't describe themselves as white nationalists. Like Steve Bannon doesn't describe himself as a white nationalist. He does describe himself as an economic nationalist. And when we look at look at the Trump base, we're talking about folks who, the kind of America first, the ideological underpinnings, of what America is, which is a white nationalist settler colony. And so it's important for us as Black folks, as these hearings are taking place, to be very clear about the fact that what we're looking for are some of these institutional actors and individuals who are a part of this larger white nationalist ecosystem, so that we can be aware of what we need to understand about who they are. And if I can say one more thing, because I think the reason why for me it's so important to talk about really the hypocrisy, in October of 2020, the Organization of American States, the OAS, put out false information about the election that involved the former president of Bolivia, Evo Morales. What that cost in the United States is essentially controls the OAS. The United States participated in supporting a movement to disrupt the democratically elected president, who now, the time that's passed, have been able to look back. They claimed that the election was being stolen by socialist radical Evo Morales. So they put all this false information out. It led to a right-wing senator taking control of the country, who engaged in brutality in their community. And luckily, they've had an election since then and elected a person from Evo Morales' party. But I bring it up to say that, when people talk about the attack on the Capitol, the attack on American democracy, the United States has participated in disrupting democratic governments all over the country, all over the world, rather. So I just don't have a whole lot of the same kind of emotional, kind of theatrics around how somber it is that the Capitol was attacked. These are conservative, right-wing white nationalists who attacked, liberal white nationalists. And again, I already described what for Black people what we need to be looking for. But this is a theater where, as far as I'm concerned, these are all bad guys.
This is just a bunch of political theater in your view.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's important for us to get the information about who's who. Right. So we should know, who are the major figures in the kind of white nationalist base that is the basis for Trump's, electoral viability. So we should know that. And so for that, we should watch and get that information. But I think all the talk around like the attack on American democracy and American democracy is under attack. This country, has, and I just named one of the most recent ones. In fact, there was a story where a US-backed firm attempted to assassinate the newly elected president of Bolivia, right? So, and these are things that you're going to find in mainstream news, which is why I'm grateful to be on here. But those are the kind of things that the Democratic president of the United States backed that was disruptive of democracy. So I don't want here to talk about, America's democracy is under attack when this country disrupts democracies all over the world.
Oh, brother. Hey, Davon, and look, and I think that's one of the big things that we can kind of glean from this whole conversation. And you started off your remarks saying that both parties are responsible for the denigration of Black people in this country, right? I mean, let's just keep it real. So yes, you have the Republicans, you have the conservatives or whatever, that part, the right wing, who is responsible for the denigration of the structures. But then what about the lives, which is much more important than the structures? I want to go to some of the comments that folks are posting and sharing their thoughts. Folks, you can share your thoughts about the primaries. You can share your thoughts about your expectations or how you feel about this upcoming January 6th hearing that's going to be taking place tomorrow. You can just share it on YouTube or our Facebook page. All right, let's go to the discussion. Let's pick it up at Karen M. Karen M posted a little high culture crew. Sorry, I'm late. Had to stop and get $6.58 per gallon gas. Kiddos got out of school early today, and I'm sitting in the car remembering the Uvalde parents. A lot for Americans to put on their minds. Gas, trying to keep their children safe, trying to keep their children's mental health in a good place, and then you're dealing with mass shootings. It's a lot that's put on a lot of people's minds right now, especially Black folks, Brother Davon. There was a recent poll, and the Washington Post put it out there, how Black people are more afraid of crazy white people, quote, and this is the term they use, crazy white people, and I'm going to have a whole conversation about it more than any other time in American history, because we're seeing from January 6th, we're seeing from these mass shootings, this sense of safety is becoming more and more of a dream rather than a reality. Can you speak on that?
Yeah, I mean, there are real to the earlier comment I made about, really the only utility from my perspective in watching, some of the committee on the January 6th committee, because one of the things that has been a real conversation on the conservative right has been secession, right? You have white folks, for as far as they're concerned, the demographic shifts of the United States, they see it as an attack on their way of life and heritage, and are arming themselves as a function of their politics around this kind of white nationalist perspective and worldview. And so yeah, I think it's important for, there's a lot going on. And I do think that a part of what I always say, particularly from, for Black people, is we got to build the institutional infrastructure and the ecosystem such that we can protect our interests and defend ourselves in the public political square. Because as things continue to kind of spiral in the way that they are, we're going to need the political wherewithal to be able to fight for our own political interests.
Absolutely. Brother King Lee checked in. Brother King Lee, good to hear from you, my big brother, checking in all the way from across the waters. He said, all I want is the authorities to be very hard on the habitual criminal. Too many habitual criminals have wreaked havoc on the African diaspora, have wreaked havoc on the African diaspora. Brother Davon, what's your take on that?
Yeah, so, as we, talk again about, violence and public safety, there was a report done by the National Institutes of Justice in 2016. And one of the things they say that it is not the length of the sentence that's the biggest deterrent to violent crime. It is the certainty that you'll get caught. So when I was talking earlier about the corruption and incompetence of law enforcement, the reason that you have people repeatedly engaged in violent acts is because many of the people who are doing it, they know these law enforcement officers are corrupt and incompetent and don't think they're going to get caught. So again, that goes back to the point that I was making around police accountability, right? If there is community oversight of law enforcement, that's going, because any industry that is insulated from external review and scrutiny is prone for corruption and incompetence. That's why you have oversight of everything, right? That's why there's a government oversight committee in Congress. That's why Congress's role is to oversee the executive branch. So when there's no oversight, and law enforcement's been able to structure policies in such a way to limit the ability of real oversight, and they continue to fight against that. What oversight does is that in addition to us being able to check and to challenge them when they engage in brutality, what it also does is it allows us to be able to see when they're being incompetent and hold them to a higher standard. And when they're held to a higher standard, what that means is that that same person who was like, if I do the shooting right here, I'm not going to get caught. In a world where there's oversight, now law enforcement has an incentive to make sure that that person actually gets caught in a way that in the current landscape they don't.
Oh, my goodness. My goodness. All right, let's go to Taylor, who's posted the comment. Check this out, Taylor. Good to hear from you. Always a pleasure to hear your thoughts. Stevie Wonder can see what is needed. Folks who are not willing to make changes themselves, but want change in their condition. Yeah. I mean, you got to put yourself out there. You really do have to put yourself out there. And folks, y'all know I'm a huge advocate that when the government starts to fail, that's when the community steps up and fill in the gaps, right? And it's going to take some time. And I think this goes back to that piece, Davon, that I was just talking about. It's going to take some time for us to become, quote unquote, engaged, active constituents, active citizens. We have been conditioned in this country to believe that the only way we're going to change the reality of our lives is by the vote, or is just by waiting for a benevolence of whether it's a white person or black person to just change some laws, create some policy, and that things like we aren't taught. And this is until we later on in life, years down the road, possibly in college for some, adulthood for others, but we really aren't taught that the citizen has to be engaged in order to see the changes that they want to see.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that has become a challenge for me, because I think, again, as a person that does legislative advocacy, that moves policy, that's engaged in politics, one of the things I'm clear about is we as a community need our own independent political infrastructure. We need to start putting people in elected office. See, the thing is, the people that are in elected office, with only a handful of exceptions, they don't work for Black people because Black people didn't put them there, right? A lot of the folks, the Black people who are in elected office, they go through these very curated networks, whether, it's the Greater Baltimore Committee's leadership program, whether it's, within kind of some of the major unions, or whether it's in, some of the major philanthropic entities, those, these different programs, the Young Democrats, they're these curated spaces where people go that they get support from folks outside of our community. They appear on ballots and we pick what folks have chosen for us to pick from. Yeah. And so really the hard work is we got to build the raw political muscle and organization, so that instead of hoping someone does what we want them to do, we're putting people where they are and telling them what to do. And that's actually one of the things, like when people come into legislative advocacy, I've had conversations where people say to me, I met with a legislator and I told them what I wanted and they didn't move on it. And what I've had to explain to people is like, no, you have to actually tell them, do exactly this. I'm going to write it and I want you to do exactly this. And if you don't do exactly this, we're going to bear down on you. That's a different level of playing the game that I think our community, to your point, it's this learned helplessness where if we're a strong enough victim, we can make these moral appeals for people to do right by us. And that's just not going to work. We got to build the political muscle that if you don't do it, we're going to take you out. We're going to put somebody else in that's going to do it. And we're going to make it hurt if you don't. I think that's the attitude we got to take politically.
I love that terminology, bro. Learned helplessness. Like that right there is just resonates for me, just simply because I know that we have been taught for so long to just believe, right? And we have been taught just for so long to just hope that things will change, that we have diminished or dumbed down our own capabilities to do what needs to be done to change the reality of our lives. I know that. I know that. That's why this thing takes so long. Like, you know, every generation or every so often you come across political leadership that really shines a light on, hey, you know what? I can't do this. You come across a mayor or a city council person or even a senator that says, you know what? I can't stop no damn crime, or I can't make schools better. That's your job to help me to do.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't seem to be the case. And I love that. Learned helplessness. Folks, I want y'all to put that down for y'all vocabulary word for homework today. Let's go back to the comments. Karina, Denise, Karina, always good to hear from you, sis. Said this. She got a few of them, but we'll put this one. All right, our lives are dependent upon the outcomes of these November elections. If GOP regain power in November, we will see peril like never before in our lifetimes. They must be defeated at the ballot box. Okay, I get that. Yeah, see, Davon, that's the place I'm in. That same response. Like, I'm not, Karina, you know I got nothing but love and respect for you. So this is not a shade on your idea. Where I'm at a place of, Davon, is putting our eggs in this basket again. Like, I'm at a place where if black folks did some radical shit, like say, not vote. Just throwing it out there. I know some people like, man, Farajii, stop saying it. But I'm saying we got to do something radical and drastic and unheard of to change the trajectory of this whole process, right? I'm not sitting down. Look. And Davon, you can explain this better than I can, bro. Local elections matter. National elections, they certainly matter, but local elections is the meat and the potatoes of governance. But what's your take on that? Like, you know, we keep putting that eggs in that basket.
So I think a few things. One is midterm elections usually have low voter turnout, lower than the presidential cycle.
Right.
And the question we have to ask ourselves is why? Why is it that there's lower voter turnout? And when we think about just the voting base in general, working class folks and you know, young working class black people in particular don't vote nearly at the higher numbers than older black folks or folks that are more middle class.
And we see that now with the latest poll, Davon.
Exactly.
Black voters do have lost confidence in that. Yeah.
Exactly. And so when we ask ourselves the question, why? The reason is because those who every election cycle say vote blue no matter who. I actually had this argument with Roland, about a year and a half ago on air, that whenever people come behind and say vote blue no matter who, the people that are usually saying it are the problem, right? Right. So the people who are usually the ones saying it are the ones who aren't passing policy that delivers for the community. And then I get asked, people say, well, Davon, you got to get people to vote for Democrats because that's going to put black people in a better position than the GOP. And as a matter of objective political fact, that is true. But the question we got to ask ourselves is, with the credibility that I've built up and the work that I've done over many years, I need to be able to go back to the community and give concrete, deliverable things that the community can tangibly see and say, okay, as a result of going out and voting for these people, this is what happened in my community, however big or small. And the problem is, as I said before, that those who are the Democratic Party consultants and the people who are put before us, who are chastising people and, grilling people, if you don't vote, you're traitor to your community. But these are the same people who every election, they see the same thing and they don't see many of the benefits. And sometimes what people try to do, and they try to name things that the Democrats have done locally that were beneficial. But see, a lot of times those things don't actually impact the larger community that's being asked to vote that don't turn out. So my response to the comment is that there has to be a caveat in that. Mm-hmm. And that caveat has to be that the Democratic Party has to decide that it's going to actually empower black people, both in terms of resources to go get people to turn out to vote, because oftentimes black people don't get the same GOTV resources that the big corporate white boys get. But the other caveat is that we have to talk about policy. What are the actual policies that are going to be delivered to our communities? And when you talk that way, then I actually have a basis to go and again, as a person who I do legislative advocacy. You know what I'm saying? I'm actually running for state central committee of the Democratic Party for the 41st district. So I'm a person who's engaged. You know what I'm saying? But in talking to people who are not, we got to talk to them about what are we going to deliver for them instead of just chastising them and telling them the world going to end if they don't vote. Because I just think that turns people off.
That's a big turn off. That's a big turn off. And I hope that we can change the conversation. Because for me, and to your point, Brother Davon, for me, it's making sure that we have a full understanding. You know, I saw, people have been saying, like, vote your interest, vote with your values, vote your values. You know what I mean? And personally, I'm just tired of keep putting my hope into a situation that's not. And I'm saying that, not to say that the Democratic Party is not doing anything. But for the time that we're currently living in, we need drastic, sometimes more aggressive policy. We talked about it here yesterday as we close out, Davon. We talked about some of the top issues that Black voters are having a problem with the Biden administration. You probably know that. I'm sure you already know it. Voting, police reform, student loan debt, and economic issues. Like if you know what I mean, like when we're talking about those type of when we have those discussions around those issues, and I'm sure, yes, we can say, oh, the Biden did this or this, the administration did that. There's gradual change. But I'm talking about this time, we're living in a time where jokers are climbing up the walls of the Capitol. We're living in a time where you see something, and people will tell you what you see is a straight lie. Oh, that's not what happened. That's not what happened. People will lie to you in your face, even though you see it for yourself, a situation. We're living in a time where we can talk Black Lives Matter, racial justice, social justice, literally one day, and then next week we talking about something totally different. The issue has moved on from Black people. And so I'm saying, like, given the volatility of the times, we need something that's going to stick. We need something that's going to be drastic and revolutionary. And I know some people have a little problem with that term, but we need something that's going to show, to your point, that Black people are being considered, not as a side note, not as a footnote, but we are in the book. We are a part of the story of this country.
And I'm gonna give the Democratic Party some unsolicited advice. If you really want Black people to turn out, like those who are really gung-ho, we need Black people to turn out for the midterms. Well, the Democratic Party should make a chief priority as we dealing with violence in our communities. Invest in local Black grassroots anti-violence organizations in the millions upon billions of dollars. The same way they do with all the public health institutions that are doing, kind of their own work. Invest, and I've actually had some fairly positive conversations. Our own U.S. Senator Chris Van Hollen's office, we actually had a conversation where they introduced a bill that would facilitate more Black-led grassroots organizations getting access to a lot of these federal anti-violence dollars. So that's something. If you're the Democratic Party, you want those people who don't vote to show up to vote. Give resources to these brothers on the street that are doing the anti-violence work, that got to work a job in order to live and do the anti-violence work after work. And invest in them and their ability to be doing this work all day long and addressing the violence in our communities all day long. That'll get them to turn out to vote. And those are the things that the Democratic Party needs to make a priority. But again, we're talking resources and money, right? And that's oftentimes where the clash is. So that's what if the Democrats really want Black people to turn out in the way needed for 2022 in November, that's one example of a thing that'll do that right there will get them the votes they need from Black people to do them give them an advantage in November.
Hey, brother, I love it. I love it. Hey, Davon, how can people learn more about the work that you're doing as Director of Public Policy for Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle?
So we're lbsbaltimore.com, LBS Baltimore, and all your relevant social media, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.
Hey, Keenan, can we pull up their website very quickly? I know we're going to take a quick pause, but lbsbaltimore.com, folks, because this is, and one of the things that I wanted to highlight is the work that you guys have been doing for years here in the city of Baltimore, around the state of Maryland. But more importantly, are there other Black think tanks that, and let me just say this, Davon, Adam Jackson, and so many others that work with Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. These are young brothers and sisters. These aren't, you know, I mean, they are advised by a lot of different people, but these are young brothers and sisters on the forefront of public policy, of legislative advocacy. Take a look at this right here, folks. That's them right there. That's Metamorphosis. She's one of the great young Black poets out of Baltimore. She's been a slam poet champion. She's been traveling around the world and around the country, sharing her thoughts on Black excellence in all types of spaces. But this is the work that they're doing. Political advocacy for Black independence in a very, very different way, to have different conversations with the ultimate goal of keeping Black people at the central focus of policy. If you want to change policy in this country, Black people got to be at the table. Black folks, and I'm talking about grassroots Black leadership has to be at the table. Community led. Check it out. They are doing some fantastic work. And Davon, we appreciate you, bro. Thank you so much. We certainly will bring you back on, especially as it gets closer to our primary here in the state of Maryland. And then as we look at some of the other big states, and of course, God willing, as we go into the November season as well. Davon Love, thank you so much, brother, for being so good for the culture.
All right. Appreciate you, bro.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come back, let's talk to the mayor of Beaumont, Texas, Mayor Robin, to talk to us a little bit about the work that she's doing in Texas and why it's important to stay involved. Stay with us. A lot to get to in the second hour of the culture right here on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, welcome back to the culture here on the Black Star Network. We're going to be kicking off our second hour in a little bit, and with our next guest, Madam Mayor Robin Mouton, of Beaumont, Texas. She'll be joining us in a few moments. But I wanted to again thank Davon for being a part of the conversation. A lot of you have had a lot of great comments and insights on just some of the big things that we've been talking about. Of course, around, tomorrow it will be the first televised public hearing for the January 6th committee. We certainly are in full throttle with the primary election season upon us. So many things are happening, so many discussions and important conversations that people are having right now about the state of this country's political system, the state of not just the country, but Black people, where we stand on the agenda. So I want to just take a quick moment to acknowledge the other comments that have come in as a result of our conversation with Brother Davon Love, who served as the Director of Public Policy for Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle think tank. I want to go to who we have here. Taylor did post something that I thought was really interesting, and I want us to be very clear about this. Taylor said, I think it is irresponsible to diminish the importance of the hearings in advance and how this process should play out. People need to watch. And I would agree. I would agree in the sense that people should watch. People should watch. Davon said the same thing, so we can understand who the players are and the dynamics of things. But I do believe that we are in that time, and Taylor, you may agree or disagree, so that's fine. But I do believe that we're in a time where we have to admit to ourselves, as Davon has pointed out, that both parties really have done its part to diminish us as a people in this country, both parties. Now, we can grandstand and say the Republican Party is out of control, the GOP is out of control, and that's absolutely fact. They're out of control. We can say, oh my gosh, they are at a point where they can't even speak the truth about something that we've all seen with our own eyes. Absolutely. But I also can't just completely forget the fact that the Democratic Party has done a lot of slow work, which has led to slow progress. And so that is one of the big things that I think that we need to keep in mind, that we have slow progress. And the way things are going on in this country, folks, y'all know it and I know it. Something needs to change, and something needs to change very soon. I mean, let's just keep it real. Something needs to change in this country where Black folks can feel like, you know what, we can get a little bit further along. We can get a little bit, get a couple of steps ahead. Something needs to change. I'm not putting all my eggs in this basket no more, folks. I know y'all might be mad with me on that one, but so be it. I just can't do it anymore. I can't do it. Not with the consciousness that the God blessed me to have and the understanding of how things go. Like it would be insane for me to keep expecting something different, some different results when you keep doing the same thing. It's insane. So to Taylor's point, I'm going to watch, because that's part of my job as a person with a platform such as this, that we want to present it, because on Friday we're going to talk about it. But you know, to have the same hope, and I love how Davon said, you know, vote blue regardless of who. Nah, bro. Nah, sis. I mean, that's not to you specifically, Taylor. It's just in general. We got to change something. We got to change something. Let's go back to the comments. Let me hear here. Check this out. We got Mikkel. Let's go to Nicole, excuse me. Nicole Spicer. Nicole, always good to hear from you, sister. Nicole pointed out, she said, it is my hope that people will vote based on facts, not feelings. We have to stay engaged before, during, and after we vote. That's it. Davon gave us a little tidbit on how we can do that. Not just going up to your legislator, your council person, your wards person. Not just going up to them and say, you know what I think is a good idea? You know how we have those conversations. You come across a political leader, you know, you at an event and you just, you know, you got your hot dog or you got your coffee. You know what I think is a good idea? That's one, okay. But to put your idea down in writing, my pops always told me that, right? Like, you know, once you put something down in writing, it takes on a whole new shape, a whole new level, and whole new form. There's thought behind it. There's some consideration behind it. And it's hard to deny. You put it down in writing in some way, shape, or form. Then you pass it on to your local representative, and boom, here's what. Then your conversation goes from, you know what I think is a good idea, to, I know this is a good idea because I did the facts and figures. Here's what I want you to do. Most of your political leaders would not expect that from a constituent. Trust and believe, folks. Most of your political leaders would not expect that as a constituent, to get that type of engagement. Here's what I want you to do. I looked at the facts for the neighborhood. I looked at the cost of living. I looked at this. I looked at that, and this is my idea. Can you make this happen? Because I did the groundwork. You can get your team to add on to it, but here's the eventual goal. And you might say to yourself, Farajii, why do we have to do that? If a person's right, why do we have to do that? Because they're not going to do it. If it's important to you, you make it important to them. Just because something is important to you doesn't mean it's important to them. So they're not going to do it. They're not as invested. And you might be saying, well, that's crazy. And I know, and trust and believe me, folks, I know it's hard to believe that you can vote somebody into office, they can shake your hands, they can kiss your baby and all of that stuff, and you feel like they're still not invested. No, they're not. We got to operate from that place like, no, they're not as invested. They're not as invested. If you operate from that place, then, you know, it's like you'll be less disappointed. You get from a place of having this high hope versus having this very real look at what's going on. So if you start to engage your political leadership from a different vantage point of what you know what is a good idea to versus this is a good idea, here's what I think that can be done based upon what I know of what's happening in the system, based upon the challenges that you face. Can we make this work? Here's a plan. And when we're talking about Black folks and plans, man, I mean, this is, you know, we didn't say this when we didn't talk about this with Brother Davon, but that is also one of the big differentiating factors for why the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, those movements that have shaped this country and have shaped the reality of Black people in this country, because they had plans. Somewhere along the line, that skill, that science of sitting down, of organizing and planning has been disrupted. So we got to get back to having that skill set of planning how we're going to address these issues. The Black Panther Party, they had their 10-point program. Hell, the Nation of Islam, we have what we want, what we believe. You have the NAACP. Every institution, if you look at it, if you look at how these institutions and how these organizations are set up, they have a plan. So we can't go to political leadership not with our hat in our hand or with a great idea. It could be great, but if it's not a plan on how to make your great idea a reality, then it just dies in your mind. It just folds up in your heart. All right. Let me go to one more, and then we're going to check back in and see if Madam Mayor is able to join us in a few moments, because I want to make sure that she gets all of the attention that she needs. B Dizzle, my man Dizzle, thank you for checking in. I think you were responding to one of our other watchers, Tiana, and you say we have a 50-50 Senate right now. The only reason that the JLVRA didn't work was because Democrats blocked breaking the filibuster. What we need is 2 to 3 more seats to nullify those. But what's the plan to do that? What's the plan to do that? Also, Dizzle said earlier in a previous comment, listening to Roland break down the numbers of Obama's 2008 win, He won North Carolina and some other states that could have been red with 80% or even 90% turnout from Black people. We have to know our power. Absolutely. You're absolutely right. Question is, how do you get people to know their power if they felt powerless? That's the question. How do we get a person have felt hopeless, powerless, apathetic, disengaged, inactive? How do you get them to get from that place to the place of feeling powerful, hopeful? They don't feel apathetic. They feel more encouraged. They are engaged. They become more active. That's a process. That's a process. It's easier to say than to actually do. You and I know that, folks. So we have to do that part. Look, I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to have more conversation, and we're going to check in with Mayor Robin. So stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. Folks, we're working on making sure that Madam Mayor is available and is able to join us. And we got her. Okay, there she goes. All right, Madam Mayor, good to hear from you. How you doing, sis?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so happy that we were able to get you connected here. We've been looking forward to the conversation with you as you represent the city of Beaumont, Texas. How is everything in Beaumont right now?
Everything's going great. It's really going great. We're coming up on a year of my mayorship, and
yes,
we are moving full speed ahead. Right now, my city manager of 28 years retired in March 31st, and then my city attorney retired in January. So upon becoming a new mayor, I am having to deal with hiring a new city manager. We did hire a new city attorney, Mrs. Sheree Reed, who was the first assistant to our longtime 42-year city attorney of Beaumont, who is now happily retired. And he's enjoying his retirement. And Mrs. Sheree Reed, who became the first Black female city attorney of Beaumont, has stepped into her own place, and she's doing a great job.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, Madam Mayor, for those who may not be familiar with who you are and how you got to become mayor of Beaumont, talk to us a little bit about your background, because not only are you, you are the first Black mayor of Beaumont, Texas. Is that correct?
First Black female.
Woman mayor, right? But first Black woman mayor of Beaumont, Texas. How did that happen for you?
Work.
Well,
Work.
it takes a lot of. It does definitely take some work to make history. So
Absolutely.
no doubt, no doubt.
You know, when you look back at trailblazers and people that have made their mark in history, it came with a lot of sweat and tears. And so I'm no different than anyone in the past that has made their mark on history in America. And I had a great team. I had a great support system. My husband, my sister, my brothers, my dad. When I tell you it was an entire family effort, I mean, I had relatives that came in from Houston, Louisiana, people campaigning. I mean, even out of state, people that had in-laws, that had friends of friends. Everyone was working. I have a first cousin that lives in Chicago. She was making phone calls, working the phones from Chicago.
Wow.
So when I tell you it was work, it was work. And it didn't matter the time when we couldn't be out on the streets, when we couldn't be on the phones. We were up doing other work that we could, that we could do and prepare for the next day. And the community came out. And I tell everyone this was just not a win for myself. This was a win for our city, to say that our city came together, not only as Black citizens, but women showed up very, very strong, because I am the only female on this council. So women really got behind me and push and drove those numbers, and just the effort along for our community to just wanting to see a change and a difference.
Right.
So it was a win for this entire city.
It certainly is, and it's a win for our people as well. As we say,
Absolutely.
it's so good for the culture, right? That you
Absolutely.
have, that we're still there, and it's fascinating, Madam Mayor. Is as I was kind of looking at your story, it's fascinating that we're still breaking barriers. We're still going through glass ceilings, even in 2021, 2022. We're still making history by being the first in some ways. Is that for you? I mean, it's historical, it's a beautiful thing, but does it bring some sense of like, man, wow, like this, I'm the first? Like, does it kind of like keep you grounded to see that, for you to be a trailblazer, and for you to be, someone that young Black girls can look up to? Does that bring you tears of joy and a sense of sadness as well, or what?
Well, one of the great things that I always look at is I am so grounded in my faith. And if you look back at my interviews, this all started because a relative that was in prayer said he heard the voice of God say, "Tell her to run." And so I was not going to run. It was a crowded field. I was the fourth person to sign up to run out of five. I was already on council. Um, I had served for 6 years. I had been mayor pro tem 2 of those 6 years. I believe had I ran, I would have had a easy race in my ward. Um, but I didn't play it safe. I knew I was the best person for this job, and I believe that God had set me for a time such as this. And so I don't get caught up in myself. I know without a doubt that God has placed me here for this time. I also know that much is given, much is required.
Absolutely.
And I just spoke and did a taped interview because I was at the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And
Yep.
on Friday night, I won the Press Club Newsmaker of the Year.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. And one of the statements that I made was that I know where I sit. I know why I sit in the seat that I sit in. But more importantly, I want to make sure that I am the example for those little Black girls that never had the opportunity when I was a little girl to see someone like me sit in that seat.
Mm.
And so, a lot of people always say, well, I'm not a role model. Well, you are a role model by default. And while you're sitting in that seat, someone is always watching what you're doing. So you have to make sure that you are setting that example for the person that is coming behind you, because you want someone to be able to say, I can do just what Ms. Mouton is doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Madam Mayor, we got to take a quick pause. When we come back, I want to get into some policy talk just for a few moments, because we for those who aren't familiar with some of the priorities and some of the big issues that the people of Beaumont, Texas are facing, and also get your take on that U.S. Conference of Mayors, that great meeting between mayoral leadership. What are some of the big things that we should expect over this next year from mayors around the country? So we want to get your thoughts on that as well. So folks, stay with us. We're talking to Madam Mayor Robin Mouton, who serves as the mayor of Beaumont, Texas. She's going to be joining us for a few moments. Make sure y'all post your comments to ask your questions to Madam Mayor as well. Stay with us. It's The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Farajii Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, welcome back to the show. We have been having a conversation with the great Madam Mayor Robin Mouton, the mayor of the city of Beaumont, Texas, to talk to us a little bit about some of the things that she is dealing with, challenged with, and more importantly, some of the joys of serving the people in Beaumont, Texas. Madam Mayor, thank you again for being with us this afternoon. I wanted to talk a little bit about policy. This is a very, very important, critically important time to be a public servant right now. You know it, and I know it. Not just for the larger country, but for Black people. What are some of the top challenges or some of the top priorities of Black folks in your city of Beaumont, Texas?
Well, for my city, one of the major challenges is crime. Crime has risen in my city among the youth, and it's something that we have not seen. And so I have called a body of leaders, and it was so ironic. I called for the meeting prior to the Uvalde shooting, but it just so happened that the meeting was scheduled for the day after the Uvalde shooting.
Wow.
And it really, really set the tone for the meeting, not even realizing or knowing that at the time the meeting was set, that we would be dealing with a mass shooting. And since then, there's been, 5 more?
Yeah, well, they said 10 over this past weekend, Madam Mayor.
Oh my God. I knew it was 4 other states this weekend. And then the Oklahoma shooting where the man went in with the back surgery and shot the doctor. And so, it's been multiple mass shootings.
Yes, ma'am.
Since Uvalde. And I'm going to blend some of the information in, and I'm probably jumping ahead, but one of the breakout sessions, we were speaking, and Mayor Turner so eloquently voiced and said that we are now faced with, in the state of Texas, House bill that does not allow an 18-year-old to, can purchase, you can purchase an assault rifle.
I saw that, Madam Mayor.
Yes, you can purchase an assault rifle at 18, but you can't even buy liquor until you're 21. So I can pack an assault rifle and walk around and kill someone. And then the result of it is that everyone is really paying the price, because this bill has passed, and then everyone is left to either run for cover, because you don't know where the next bullet is coming from. And it's so sad, but we have all of these guns on the street. And so you have Ted Cruz that's saying it's not the guns, it's the mental health. But if you have mental health and you can buy a gun, it's like telling an arsonist, well, you didn't set that fire. And it's almost, it's just crazy. It's just a crazy notion to say that we are turning people on the streets with a rifle that is used in combat war.
Yes, ma'am.
And how many mass murders have to happen before we have gun reform? And it shouldn't be the Democrats or the Republicans. This should be nonpartisan. It should be a nonpartisan. Somehow they should be able to come together to say we have to work on this together. And unfortunately, when it doesn't hit your home or your family, you really don't feel it. But at some point, you have to say, enough is enough. enough is enough.
So for you, Madam Mayor, you're in Texas, which is one of the big advocates of gun ownership, a state that has, open carry laws. How do you combat that? How do you combat that in terms of creating legislation that speaks to the current attitude of your constituents, which may be, look, I don't, you could own a gun, but at 18 you can't buy a semi-automatic rifle. And then at the same time, getting people to a mental place where they understand the severity of that responsibility if they become reckless with that responsibility. Like, how do you put that in policy form?
I believe if I had the words to put it in policy form, it would already be a policy.
Okay, yes, ma'am. I can go with that.
Because you're trying to talk sense to someone that has a mental illness that cannot comprehend why do you need an assault rifle at 18 years old? Why does anyone need an assault rifle that has a magazine to hold 100 or more bullets? And in that event in Uvalde, he took two 100-round magazines and taped them together, if I'm not mistaken, so that he didn't even have to stop and reload.
Damn.
So it's just a continuous flow of 200 rounds of bullets to little children where you could not even identify their bodies. I could not even imagine what that was like as a mother or a family member to have to even walk up to that school. All I could do was just, I'm shaking right now, just even.
I can hear it. I can hear it.
Thinking of.
Madam Mayor, I want to, are there any particular measures that your administration is taking to make sure that this doesn't become a massacre or a same tragedy in Beaumont? Are you now having conversations with your school superintendent to lock schools? What's the conversation like right now with your school leadership?
Well, and that's the meeting that I told you I proactively called prior to Uvalde, which was right at the end of school. Our children are out of school right now, but we did meet with, it was a round table of our chief of police, the Beaumont Independent School District chief, the sheriff, the FBI agent, the DA, our neighboring chief of police, and also their ISD school chief, the assistant police chief, the mayor pro tem, myself, and there were a couple of others. But just, we don't want to sit back and wait to say, oh, well, we saw this coming. I mean, we want to be proactive.
Sure.
To step out before we can be the next city, because we don't want to be the next city. That is one interview that I don't want to ever have and hope to not ever have. And so with that, we had great conversation, and we are scheduling another meeting in the near future so that we can have a format and a layout so that we can just step right into a plan of action so that we're not just stumbling and looking around to, point a finger. Because when someone puts you in a leadership role, they expect you to lead.
Yep. Yep.
That's why they elect you, so that you can lead them.
And you know what, Madam Mayor, what I hear from you is a woman who don't see herself as a politician. This is just the energy and what I'm hearing from you, sis. You don't see yourself as a politician. You see yourself as a member of a community.
I've lived here all my life. I was born and raised here. I love Beaumont. I could have left Beaumont numerous of times, but I decided to stay in Beaumont because I love my city. I want my city to prosper and grow. And I want to lead this city to a bright future collectively, so that our children can have a future here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What do you say to our watchers? And some of them, they hail from Texas, and others are coming from across the United States and across the waters. But what do you say at a time like this? When
Get involved. A lot of people think that they can't make a difference, but trust me, everyone can make a difference. And just some of the little things that you can do. And I tell everyone, if you see something, say something. Because one of the 17-year-olds that's indicted for murder right now in Beaumont, one of the neighbors said that they heard the gunfire in the neighborhood 2 or 3 days prior before the killing. And if they had just made that phone call, I would have much rather have him arrested for playing with the gun than arrested for killing someone with the gun. And that would have made the difference in both families' lives.
Yes, ma'am. And and the other part about it is our culture. And we call this show The Culture because I think that people underestimate, Madam Mayor, how much we are influenced to stay quiet, or how much we are influenced to not be involved or not be active, right? Or how our culture we've created, it truly has like disrupted the idea of community, and then to the point where, well, that's them, I'm over here, I don't want to get involved, I'm not going to get into somebody else's business. Not having a collective conscience to see something and say something, not having the collective conscience to think, okay, even though this may not be affecting me at this particular moment, this is going to be a problem for the rest of us down the road.
Absolutely. And I grew up in the 60s, and where I grew up with the village mentality. If you did something, Miss Sarah, Miss Lou, they would whip you, then they would send you home, and then your mom and dad would whip you. So I grew up in that era. If you did something, that adult had the right to not only correct you, but discipline you and then send you home. And you knew your parents were going to discipline you. That's right. I think for our culture, we have lost that. We've lost that.
And as a result, this is what we're seeing, Madam Mayor.
As a result, this is what we're dealing with today.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Madam Mayor Robin Mouton, thank you so much for your time with us today. We hope and pray for your success as the leader of the great city of Beaumont, Texas. Thank you so much. You are always welcome to join us as things are happening in Beaumont or around Beaumont that you want us to be aware of. But we thank you so much, and congratulations on your historical win.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. Folks, that was Madam Mayor Robin Mouton of Beaumont, Texas. We're going to take a quick pause. When we come back, let's talk a little bit about Deshaun Watson. I'm asking one question, folks. One simple question. Should he be allowed to play in the NFL after some very, very damaging information has been revealed about his behavior? I want to, just me and you, let's talk. Should he be allowed to play? Stay with us. That conversation is coming up next. We'll be right back.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
It's time to be smart.
Roland Martin's doing this every day.
Oh, no punches!
Thank you, Roland Martin, for always giving voice to the issues.
Look for Roland Martin in the whirlwind, to quote Marcus Garvey again.
The video looks phenomenal, so I'm really excited to see it on my big screen.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
I got to defer to the brilliance of Dr. Carr and to the brilliance of the Black Star Network.
I am rolling with Roland all the way.
Honored to be on a show that you own. A black man owns the show.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now. Roland was amazing on there.
I love y'all. I can't commend you enough about this platform that you've created for us to be able to share who we are, what we're doing in the world, and the impact that we're having.
Let's be smart. Bring your eyeballs home.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared. You dig?
All right, folks. The NFL football season will be upon us in a little bit, in a few months. And now, considering draft and everything and where we are with the schedule, the NFL has released its preseason games. But there are still a number of issues that have yet to be resolved by the NFL. Now, as you know, here on this show, we've talked about some of those issues, about the relationship that the NFL has with its women staffers, to the Colin Kaepernick, to what we saw about racism with former coach Brian Flores. Now the NFL has another problem. Deshaun Watson, one of their great shining QBs, who has now transferred from the Houston Texans to being the starter for the Cleveland Browns. The crazy part about the situation is that Deshaun has been rewarded with a $230 million contract to be the quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. Now, that's not the issue. as much as, I mean, it could be. But the real issue is the fact that Mr. Watson has a problem, and it's a problem relating to women, a high number of women. According to a latest New York Times investigation, Deshaun Watson met with at least 66 women for massages over a 17-month period, far more than what was previously disclosed. Now you say, well, what's the problem? Well, it was during the course of those massages that Mr. Watson has been accused of sexual violations. And so in this new New York Times expose, I want to just, Keenan, if we could throw that quote from what the New York Times had to say about this whole scenario, talking about the examination of their records. Check this out, folks. The New York Times, they examined the records, including depositions and evidence for civil lawsuits, as well as interviews of some of the women that showed that he, Deshaun Watson, engaged in more questionable behavior than it was previously known. The Times review also showed that Watson's conduct was enabled, knowingly or not, by the team he played for at the time, which was the Houston Texans, which provided the venue that Deshaun Watson used for some of the appointments. Now, there's a team representative also furnished him with a non-disclosure agreement after a woman who is now suing him threatened online to expose his behavior. This is all coming from the New York Times, folks. The other thing is, like I said, 66 women he dealt with. Not all the women who gave him massages between October of 2019 and March of 2021 have detailed their interactions with him. Some say have shared their experience and say they have no problems with him, but others describe troubling and similar behavior. Now, out of the 66 women, 24 who have sued him, including 2 who have filed suits within the last week. In the most recent suit, the woman said Watson masturbated during the massage. Another woman who sued but then withdrew the complaint because of privacy and security concerns. 2 other women who filed criminal complaints against him but did not sue him. At least 15 therapists who issued statements of support for Watson at the request of his lawyers and gave him massages during that period. At least 4 therapists from Genuine Touch, which is the massage therapy group contracted with the Texans. 5 women identified by the plaintiff's lawyers during the investigation for their civil suits, and at least 15 other women whose appointment with Deshaun Watson were confirmed through interviews and records reviewed by the New York Times. Now, I see Mocha Mima saying the key to this is civil lawsuits. Where are the criminal charges? Well, you remember in this case, he wasn't criminally found guilty, but there's the accusation of 66 women he's been in contact with. And as a result of that, it's all questionable as to how many women. I mean, we heard about the first 24, but then now you got this new number of 66. Should he be allowed to play? I don't think he should. Now, look, I'm not saying this from a space of self-righteousness, folks. I'm saying this from a space of when is enough enough? And I saw so many, I see that some people have said, well, white players are allowed to do worse and they're still allowed to play. That is not a strong argument in my eyes of a man who takes his liberties and uses his professional status as a way to violate women. I think we need to differentiate between those two. If you violate a woman, then there should be some consequences for that violation. It's just that simple, right? There is a system that is at place here. And folks, we don't have a lot of time to get into it, but I wanted to at least start the conversation. That the problem that I see with this situation is that there's a system. He was enabled. He was given a place by the Houston Texans. They knew that he had this issue. non-disclosure agreements, which allow women to not say anything of their interaction in their engagement with Deshaun Watson. I mean, all of this to protect their $1 million investment or millions dollar investment. So let's go and share with you just a couple of thoughts that what people are saying. So we posted Mocha, Mike V. Let's go to what Mike said. So the information only comes out after the $230 million contract was announced. Well, it was an investigation, Mike. Yeah, I mean the $230 million contract. Well, I'm not quite sure which you're insinuating, but I think this would have came out regardless, to be honest, because it's a story. The Browns signed him, but I don't think the Browns really understood how serious. Let me tell you something about journalists, folks. Let me tell you something about journalists. Journalists will get the information. They will get the information before the people that need to know get the information. You understand what I'm saying? So it's very reasonable to believe that the Cleveland Browns did not get this information or did not know the depths of this situation. It's very reasonable to believe that. So yeah, why not? Why not? I don't care how much. I mean, look, he's getting rewarded. And I know the NFL does not reward people for their character. The NFL rewards people for their athleticism, for their physicality, for their ability to win games and to create profits. I get that part. But as we, as consumers of sports, if you love football, and I love football, if you love football, if you watch football, you draw a line. You draw a line. There should not be a special exception for athletes, for multi-million-dollar athletes to get a pass on any level of sexual violation. Or the same thing that we saw with the level of system and the level of enabling of a Deshaun Watson, we can say the same thing for an R. Kelly. We can say the same thing for Harvey Weinstein. We could say the same thing for Jeffrey Epstein. Like they all had a system a system of violating girls and women. There was always a system. Janae checked in and said, so Deshaun is getting a better deal than Cosby, no jail time, and his accusations are more current. Brother King Lee, women need to stay away from famous and powerful men. How about powerful men need to stop violating women? I'm not victim blaming. And I'm not sure, King Lee, if that's... No, how about powerful men need to know when to draw the line? How about powerful men stop using their status as a way to take advantage of a woman? How about that for a minute? Forensic accountant checked in. Forensic, always good to hear from you. Massage parlors and the people who own them are nasty, even the reputable ones. Okay. That may be, I mean, I don't know. I've never been to a massage parlor. I mean, I've gotten massages, but these were very, very reputable places. But yeah, I don't know. That might be the problem. But it doesn't take away the fact that this man violated some women in some way, shape, or form. It doesn't take away the fact. Why would you need to have a non-disclosure agreement to get a massage? Like, what are you doing where you don't want the masseuse to say anything about? Other than if you're doing your job, if you're there to help somebody to get their body back in a better place, what is the NDA for? I mean, and I know that some folks might be saying, well, I mean, that's what guys do. Or look, here's the thing, folks. I think, and this is just my opinion, so you can agree with it or disagree with it. We got to stop thinking about the current moment and think about the implications of the current moment on future events, on the future in general. You got black boys who are looking up to Deshaun Watson. Now, is he the most terrible person in the world? No, I'm not saying that by a long shot. But I'm saying that if black boys are looking up to Deshaun Watson and saying, oh, I want to be like him because he getting money. He getting $230 million for that football, with that football. Like, and you don't teach black boys that it's not just about their athleticism. It's not about their physicality, but it's also about their character. It's also about their discipline. It's also about self-control. It's also about being a decent human being. That's the real thing about an athlete. If an athlete can personify their excellence on the field, they should be able to personify their excellence off the field. And I think that when you're looking at this situation, no, he should not be rewarded for it. Hate me if you want, debate me if you need to, but he should not be rewarded for it. The Cleveland Browns should be looking and trying to figure out how can we pull back on some of this money. It's just that simple. Let me go to B Dizzle. Dizzle got one more thing, and as we wrap up this part, and y'all can certainly share your thoughts with me on my social media. You can hit me up. But Dizzle said, my motto is dudes need to be more responsible, show self-control. Women should be able to work wherever they want without worrying about dudes like him. Exactly. Exactly. When you start to read the level of detail that the system that Deshaun Watson had created, I'm telling you, he would go onto Instagram, he would, talk to these women, they would see who he is, check the background. Oh, this is really the Deshaun Watson, the quarterback, the star, mega star quarterback. He would, approach them and say, hey, I'm in Houston, meet me at this place, I'll fly you out. Can I get a massage? I mean, he would do this. Folks, I've read some of the details of this story. He would do this. Bring him out to this place in Houston. He had like a little setup there. Of course, he had like a penthouse, and then he had this massage space that everybody knew about, and the women would just come in, and then boom. But that's not good. I don't care if you're making a million, a billion, or a dollar. It's not good, and it should not be acceptable. I was always taught that no nation can rise higher than its women, than its woman. If a woman is constantly violated, if a woman is constantly put under pressure, if a woman is constantly being degraded and diminished and just being used and abused, how far do you think this country would get? How far do you think any group of people will get if we don't take up for women, if we don't respect women, if we don't protect women? We often say, Malcolm X said, women are the most disrespected people on the planet Earth. And that's true. But it can't be that's true except in cases where women are engaged with powerful men or powerful black men. And to the very quick point of, this is another black man, you're trying to take down a black man. I'm so sick and tired of it. Look, black men, y'all understand, we understand that we are not stupid people. We understand that if you violate someone, it's a violation. This is not about your blackness as much as it's about your character. And that we have to say enough is enough. Because if you have a daughter or a sister or a mother or a granddaughter or a niece, you would not want any of one of those women figures in your family or girl figures to be violated. I'm going to quickly remind, as we say this, folks, I'm going to remind us, remember when I shared with you the story of D.L. Hughley and how he said he did not believe his youngest daughter when she told him that one of his friends violated her, and that stuck with him for the rest of your life, of his life. That is a heavy burden to carry. And Brother King Lee said, Brother Farajii, this is alleged behavior, however, speak your truth. Yes, this is alleged behavior. But out of 66, King, out of 66 women, it's hard for me to believe that they're all lying. But you're right. In the space of where we are right now, this is alleged behavior. But if any of this is true, then that man should not be able to play. That's not just a Deshaun Watson problem. That's an NFL problem, and that's a cultural problem as well. All right, folks, we got to get out of here. I appreciate y'all for checking in and being a part of the conversations today. Thank you all for your insights, your comments. I want to thank my very special guest, Mayor Robin Mouton of Beaumont, Texas, and my brother Davon Love, Director of Public Policy for Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. Hey, folks, this is the conversations. You hear it, have these discussions. Make sure you support us. Go to blackstarnetwork.com. Support us with your dollars, and every dollar counts. Your 5 cents, your 10 cents, your $10, your 30, your 50, 100, 1,000, 200,000. Every dollar counts with us here at Black Star Network. So we need your support. If you can't support us financially, make sure you download the app, tell your family and friends about us, and let them know Black-owned media is here. And God willing, we'll be here to stay. All right, stay tuned. Up next at the 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time is Brother Roland Martin with Roland Martin Unfiltered. So get into those set of conversations there. As always, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong. Stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we'll talk tomorrow. Tomorrow, I'm going to have a very special guest, musical artist, Mr. Frank McComb is going to be joining us here on The Culture. We'll have a conversation with him. And of course, we're going to talk to you about what to expect more of as we get into more details around the upcoming televised hearing for the January 6th committee. So we're going to have a lot of great conversations tomorrow. You don't want to miss 1 minute of it. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in. And God willing, we'll talk tomorrow for another exciting edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Peace.